You've selected the presentation for project costing and estimating. This is a part of the subject Construction Economics 1. The photo vision that is in this cover slide is the construction of the Tokyo monorail construction. Too far into this, just a bit of a course summary on things that you might need to know. Contacting me, you can email me, or you can post a question up on the forum, or otherwise use all the forums. You can post a discussion up on the student forum and discuss it with other students. Be very clear about assessment submission dates, presentation and assessment format. It's critical. Also remember, this PowerPoint presentation is only a summary of this subject and not meant to replace the study guide, the course text, or other resources and reading. What we're looking at in this subject is the practical procedures of project cost estimating, including information and quality. Quality and accuracy is the crux of good estimating. The major parts of the estimating cycle we'll be looking at, and what comprises superior cost estimate, and what to look for when establishing confidence or concern with your clients, or if what you're looking for yourself, what questions to ask, so that you know a cost estimate has been put together in a professional and in a manner which represents good quality and accuracy. In evaluating project cost estimates, we look at the project in 3 stages. We look at the concept stage, which is where there's a brief documentation available, essential information, what's to be built, very limited written information. Milestones may be identified. We've also got the design stage, which is where the project is more definite. Documentation for design is important, and approval of the project for intermediate funding. So it's a bit more further developed. There's more product, capacity, quality, location, and there's fewer options now remaining to what there was on the concept stage. In the concept stage, there's quite often options and issues, but in the design stage, we're looking at fewer options. And if there are options, we're looking at drilling down more of the specified areas. The last project stage to look at with the estimate is the tender stage. Now, this is characterised by converting all the design documentation into detailed design, procuring the required equipment, materials. So it's an important step, followed by then the construction, startup, and the on-site operation. I've summarised here the key practices when developing a good estimate, and these really need to be followed every time you're either looking at an estimate or looking to do an estimate, and they're simple. I mean, what is to be built? Defining the planning and administration requirements around the project, estimating and data and estimating methods. Is it going to be a rough sort of a $1 per bed, $1 per GFA, a detailed design, cubing, assigning qualified estimating resources, and have you got enough of that in-house, or do you have to look elsewhere for it? Calculation of major cost elements. Do we need assistance there? Is there any design and site considerations that we need to be aware about? The cost of design, project management, and startup owner costs, very important. Cash flowing and the projections of these contingencies. What do we want to put in there, and what type of qualifications do we need to make? Reasonableness and checking, and most importantly, something which I always think is really important, comparing with other costs from similar projects, or looking at those components in the estimate that you can compare with other projects. Looking at what is to be built, we need to consider is there a protocol? Does the company have a definition, or do they define what each project should be like? Is the scope adequate? Is there any review and feedback process for projects, and specific responsibilities? Who approves what? Who reviews what? Those type of things. So that's a very important process. Planning and administration. It's really the method of planning and administration. So what type of practices are utilised? Is the level of planned level of construction, administration and planning sufficiently comprehensive in content and format for the project in question? So what I'm saying there is a very detailed, high profile. It may be something to do with energy and power, a power station, to the extreme, a nuclear reactor. So what type of administration processes and contract administration considerations do we need to consider with all of these, as long as as well as the value engineering, what type of components and life cycle costing, plans, quality and safety, how do they need to be considered when we're looking at the so we also need to consider the estimating data and method. From what I'm saying there is what type of method of measurement? Is there enough detail there to measure it in a lot of detail to actually do a very detailed measure? Having said that, is it really worthwhile? Do we have similar projects which we can source data from? Is there book areas produced by different institutes, or do we have to rely on published information such as Rawlinson's or Cordell's? Each of those methods as well, again, if we go back to a standard rate that you may have built up, or maybe industry recognised as gross floor area per dollar, what's the method versus the accuracy? And what are we looking for with the accuracy in this estimate? Resources, no different to anything in construction really, but it's familiarity, what type of history, and the maturity of looking at the estimate. It's quite often, if it's a large project, it's great to have a younger group mix as well as mature people involved. Talk about calculating the major cost elements. I've shown here some elements of building. It's broken up into substructure, finishes, fittings, that type of thing. Try to ensure where you can industry standards of breaking that building up. And using those major cost elements then to actually plan the project with your time program and also with your cash payments. So how you establish the estimate now has an afterlife and also a contract administration life, and possibly and should do even a final account and practical completion life as well. You need to consider all the aspects of the site and the construction and how these will affect the estimate. That's everything from access, from storing materials, from actually doing the build. And it's very often that people say that estimators have already the projects built in their mind, and the scope and price before the construction even starts. I myself must say that that's honestly true, and there's some benefits in the sense that projects where I have actually been the estimator and then gone on to be either the contracts administrator or the project manager, it's been very beneficial because I've already looked at the drawings, I've detailed it, I've priced it, and I've been able to actually then go out and the communication hasn't really been necessary. It's already in my head. So it's important to consider the entire costs of design, project management, startup and owner costs. There's a lot of specialty costs and detail that need to be included in the estimate. There's relationships between major categories of design work such as engineering specialists, drafting, support documentation and so forth. So the appropriate project management and concept commencement, there's a lot of assumptions that really can be scoped and actually included in the estimate. So it's solid. There's something to work with, and there's also a framework for what the estimate actually is accountable for, and ensuring that in all of those areas, the owner's costs and scope and things like that it's clearly defined what's required. From the owner's perspective, that it's clear and communicated to the contractor, and that the materials and what's required is very clear. Another important quantification and calculation as a part of the estimate is the project cash flow and time projections. There's some difficult areas though that need qualification. Some of those are well known, like with weather conditions. There's things that are very hard to estimate and to quantify, but based on previous years' weather patterns, that type of thing, you can make some allowances there. Site conditions, the amount of plant and equipment, and the type and complexity of the structure, and that might not just be the structure itself, but it might also be accessing the structure, getting rid of spoil, getting rid of rubbish, deliveries, that type of thing. So what you might do is actually create a Gantt chart, a time bar chart, and also plot the cash flow, where the costs associated with the project, bring that through at the estimate stage as well. Contingency is a very important part of the estimate, and it's an area which often some organisations just apply a percentage. Myself, that really needs to be calculated and apply to every individual site or every individual project. The contingency method really needs to be validated for each actual project, and that goes to how the calculation is applied. So there'll be certain risks, as we said on the previous slide, and it might be weather conditions, it might be site conditions, it could be a number of different things that you can actually make some assumptions of those days, that period, that outage, that type of thing, and making that as sure that the sub-project and major components also have have some type of allowance next to it. So the important thing in the contingency is all those project risks that you haven't been able to quantify in the estimate, that you've made a dot point here in the contingency, and somehow, if you can't calculate it, at least applied some type of cost or estimate to those. Another area that's very important in the estimate is qualifications, inclusions and exclusions. These need to be very clear, very specific. A lot of time the qualifications is the area that brings down the overall estimate and the actual credibility of the estimate. And there's been many court cases over where something was included in a price or not included in a price. And I've identified here the reasons why that it isn't always the case. So these are just a summary, but I believe that the qualifications, you really need to think about those things, that either the detail in the documents you can't physically price it, you can't get enough scope, you can't actually go that next step further to actually really put a good dollar figure in it. And so it's really important to note those out in the qualifications. And lastly, the area of checking the estimate. Checking the estimate, we can go through. We can look at the rates. We can look at the overall costs per element. We can look at costs per particular type of labour component areas. One of the most important elements of the estimate when checking is to compare with other similar projects. And if you've got the in-house data, you can compare like with like. If you've done a shopping centre or a small office building before, it might be bigger area, there might be some variations in it, but having said that, some of those elemental components in there, like the substructure or the roof, once we break it back to $1 per square metre cost, it should be pretty much the same. The other area to compare and use as a bit of a benchmark check might be to again use published estimates and published estimating material and data, and that might be from something like Cordell's or Rawlinson's. Possibly not ideal, but at least it's some type of comparator. At least it's something that you can say, well, I'm within the those type of defined estimate boundary. To the end now of the presentation for project costing and estimating. It's an excellent time now for you to go over and read the study guide again, refer to any subject texts, further course reading, and approach the workbook activities. If you have any questions, you can post them to the Q&A forum, post them and discuss them with other students on the student forum, or you can email me directly.